Charles Bronson was an American actor who worked in movies and on TV. He was best known for playing tough guys. It's hard to look away from Bronson because his eyes are so big and sharp. People didn't like Bronson very much because he was known for not caring about his co-stars in movies, but Jill Ireland seems to have found a soft spot for him. Their love story was one for the ages, but it didn't end as happily as in a story. If you want to know why, stay tuned as we go into more detail about this story of love, loss, and growth. Bronson was born in Ehrenfeld, New York, on November 3, 1921. He served in the war. Pennsylvania, a place where coal is mined in the Allegheny Mountains, not far from Johnstown. His family was Roman Catholic and from Lithuania. He was the 11th of 15 children. The very big family slept in their cold water shack in shifts. A few yards away were the coal car lines that led out of the mine. Walter Buchinski was his father. He was a Lipka and was born in Druskininkai, a village in the south of Lithuania. The mother of Bronson was named Mary, and her parents were from Lithuania. The coal-rich town of Tamaqua, Pennsylvania, is where she was born. Like many other first-generation American kids he grew up with, Bronson said his home didn't have a lot of English sounds when he was a kid. He once said that his accent was so strong that even as a soldier, his fellow soldiers thought he was from another country. He could also speak Russian and Lithuanian, as well as English. In an interview in 1973, Bronson said that he didn't really know his father and wasn't even sure if he liked or hated him. He said that all he remembered about his dad was that whenever his mother told the kids that their dad was coming home, they would hide. When Bronson's father died of cancer in 1933, he went to work in the coal mines, first in the office and then in the mine itself. Later, he remembered that he got paid $1 for every ton of coal he dug. But in a later interview, he said that he had to work 2 shifts just to make $1 a week, which is about $24 today. Later, Bronson remembered that he and his brother did dangerous work clearing stumps between the mines, where cave-ins happened often. He says he went hungry a lot during the Great Depression because his family was very poor. For some reason, his sister didn't get milk from their mother, so she drank warm tea. He said he had to wear his older sister's dress to school because they didn't have any clothes for him. Bronson was the first person in his family to finish high school. Before he joined the U.S. Army Air Forces in 1943, Bronson worked in mines. This was during the dark days of World War II. Next, he was in the 76th Flexible Gunnery Training Squadron. In 1945, he was a Boeing B-29 Superfortress aerial gunner with the 69th Bombardment Group's 61st Bombardment Squadron, which was based on Guam and flew missions against the Japanese home islands. He made it through 25 missions and was given the Purple Heart for his battle scars. When the war was over, Charles was left without a plan. It wasn't until he met traveling actors that he found a new mission. Job history and schooling after World War II. Bronson did a few odd jobs. A Philadelphia theater group hired him to paint sets, and soon after he started playing small roles. After that, Bronson and Jack Klugman, who would also become an actor, shared an apartment in New York City. This was the last step. He went to Hollywood to study at the Pasadena Playhouse. Although he didn't get any credit, Bronson's first movie role was as a sailor in You're in the Navy Now 1951, which was directed by Henry Hathaway. He supposedly got the part because he was the only actor who could burp on order. The Mob and The People Against O'Hara were 2 other movies he was in 1951. Both were directed by John Sturges. He was in Red Skies of Montana, Bloodhounds of Broadway, Battle Zone, Pat and Mike, Diplomatic Courier, My 6 Convicts by Henry Hathaway, and My 6 Convicts by Henry Hathaway in 1952. In that same year, he fought Roy Rogers in a ring on Rogers' show Knockout. He was a fighter in a skit with Skelton as Cauliflower McPug on an episode of The Red Skelton Show. Biff Baker from the U.S. A CBS spy show where he shared the screen with Lee Marvin. In the year 1915. In the horror movie House of Wax, directed by André de Toth, he played Vincent Price's helper Igor. He took a class in sign language to prepare for his role as a deaf person. Buczynski adds mute menace as a deaf and dumb assistant to the madman, said Ben S. Parker of the Commercial Appeal. In the U.S., it won fourth place as the fourth highest grossing movie of that year and made a total of $23 million. The House of Wax was added to the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress in 2014 so that it could be kept forever. He changed his name to Bronson in 1954. Since the hearings of the House Un-American Activities Committee, many names from Eastern Europe sounded sketchy in this anti-Soviet atmosphere. On the corner of Melrose Avenue and Bronson Street, at Paramount Studios, there is a gate called the Bronson Gate. This was the idea for the movie Bronson. From 1999 to 2000, Bronson played a minor role in the war movie Never So Few, which was made by John Sturges. In the year 1999, he made guest turns on TV in episodes of Yancey Derringer Hell and High Water and in You, K.S. Marshall. Charles got off to a good start in the entertainment business with a few more parts after his first ones. In 1960, he played one of 7 gunfighters in John Sturges's The Magnificent Seven who fought for the helpless. Eli Wallach, who co-starred with Bronson, said that during shooting, Bronson was a loner who kept to himself. He got $50,000 for the part, which is a lot more money now. The movie didn't do well at the box office in the United States, but it was such a big hit in Europe that it made money in the end. A review in Harrison's reports called it a superb Western, well acted and crammed full of action, human interest, pathos, suspense, plus some romance and humor. In 2013, the U.S. National Film Registry of the Library of Congress chose the film to be preserved because it was culturally, historically, and aesthetically important. In 1970, he was in 3 TV shows: Street of Hate on Laramie, The Generous Politician on The Islanders, and Zigzag on Riverboat. In the second season of Hennessy, he had a stable part. The first time they were seen was in the 3rd episode. Hennessy a La Gun. The second time was in episode 26, The No Good Nick, which aired in 1991. In the same year, Bronson had small parts in the movies Master of the World, directed by William Whitney, A Thunder of Drums of Joseph Newman, and X-15, directed by Richard Donner. Bronson first appeared on TV in 1961 in an episode of One Step Beyond called The Last Round. He then co-starred with Elizabeth Montgomery in an episode of The Twilight Zone called Two. His guest role in an episode of CBS's General Electric Theater called Memory in White got him nominated for an Emmy Award. The next year, he was in the Elvis Presley movie Kid Galahad. In 1963, Bronson played the lead role in John Sturges's thriller The Great Escape, which was about prisoners of war in World War II. Critics gave the movie good marks. A consensus of critics on Rotten Tomatoes said, "The Great Escape is an all-time action classic. Its story builds slowly but surely, and its cast is one for the ages." It made $11.7 million at the box office on a budget of $4 million. It made a lot of money and was one of the biggest hits of the year. At the Golden Globes, it was up for Best Picture, and it's currently ranked 19th in AFI's 100 Years. 100 Thrills. He kept working on a lot of standards and hits, and in 1968 he really started working on European movies. On the set of Villa Rides, directors of Jean Herman's French movie Adieu l'ami first met Bronson. They were looking for an American co-star to work with Elaine Delon, who liked Bronson's work. Later, Bronson's agent Paul Kohner said that the producer had told him that the star would be great in the movie. When it comes to movies in the US, all the money and attention go to pretty boy heroes in Europe. People are more interested in characters than faces. Bronson was signed in December 1967. Marseilles and Paris were used to make the movie. The movie made about $6 million in France, where it was a huge hit. Bronson kept appearing in a string of international productions. Movies made in Europe became very famous. According to TV Guide, Delon and Bronson are said to have great energy together. Sergio Leone's spaghetti western Once Upon a Time in the West was another hit in Europe. He played one of the stars in that movie. Before this movie, Bronson turned down Leone for the major role in A Fistful of Dollars, which came out in 1964. 8 million tickets were sold in Italy for the movie. In the US, more than $5 million was made from selling 3.7 million tickets. Around 14 million more tickets were sold in France and 13 million more were sold in Germany. The Library of Congress agreed that it was culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant and added it to the U.S. National Film Registry. Some people also said it was one of the best westerns ever made and one of the best movies ever. Bronson was called the greatest actor I ever worked with by Leone. The Michael Winner movie Chatto's Land, which came out in 1972, was the first of many big hits for Bronson and United Artists. In the years that followed, they worked together on movies like The Mechanic and The Stone Killer, which were both produced by him and Winner. By 1973, Bronson was the biggest movie star in the world, making $1 million for each movie. At age 52, Bronson played his most famous part in Death Wish, which was also his most popular movie. The movie was directed by Michael Winner. He played the role of Paul Kersey, a successful New York builder who turns into a vigilante after his wife is killed and his daughter is raped. After this movie came out, there were 4 more movies with Bronson in them over the next 20 years. A lot of people found the movie offensive and called it an immoral threat to society and an example of how to act badly toward others. But that year, it made $22 million, making it the 21st highest-grossing movie in the U.S. Charles Bronson became famous in action movies, and he kept working in those genres over the years. In 1975, he was in 2 movies for Tom Gry's breakout in Breakheart Pass, a western based on a book by Alistair MacLean that didn't do well at the box office. In the same year, he also played a street fighter during the Great Depression in Walter Hill's directorial debut, Hard Times. He made a living by fighting illegally in Louisiana. People gave it good reviews. At the box office, the movie made $5 million, making it the 29th most successful movie in the U.S. that year. Roger Ebert said, "A powerful, brutal film containing a definitive Charles Bronson performance." In 1975, Bronson was the 4th most popular actor at the box office, behind Robert Redford, Barbra Streisand, and Al Pacino. The next year, Bronson made a Western comedy for UA called Frank D. Gilroy's From Noon to 3. In the same year, Bronson made his first movie with director J. Thomas Lee. Bronson played Dan Shamron in Irvin Kershner's Raid on Entebbe in 1997. The TV movie on NBC was based on a real story about the Entebbe raid and got mostly good reviews at first. It was turned into a movie in early 1977 and quickly became popular in the UK and other parts of Europe. The movie tried to make the most of the great group cast. It was named Best Television Movie at the Golden Globes. The show was also up for Outstanding Special Drama or Comedy at the Emmy Awards. It won and was nominated for other awards as well. Again that same year, he was in The White Buffalo with Thompson, which was directed by Dino De Laurentiis and filmed at the UAE. Will also put out Telecon that same year. It was directed by Don Siegel. Finally, in 1977, Bronson became known as the star of the movie Raise the Titanic. He was in the movie, but not in the movie itself. Bronson turned down Ingmar Bergman's offer to work with him on a movie in the 1970s, saying that Bergman's movies are dull. Everything is weakness and sickness with Bergman, he stated. Bruce Bronson tried out for the part of Superman in the 1978 movie version, but director Ilya Salkind passed him over because he looked too ordinary. Christopher Reeve was given the part instead. Capricorn 1 was another major role he was said to be interested in for a 1978 movie. He was tried out to play Snake Plissken in the 1981 movie Escape from New York. But director John Carpenter thought he was too old and tough-looking for the part. He chose Kurt Russell instead. Brother Bronson was in two. Love and Bullets and Borderline are movies that ITC has made. In Capablanco, he met up with Thompson again. Bronson works with Lee Marvin in Peter Hunt's 1981 action movie Death Hunt. It's a made-up story about how the Royal Canadian Mounted Police chased a man named Albert Johnson, who was played by Bronson. As Vincent Canby wrote in his review for the New York Times, he saw that two old pros were at work. Mr. Bronson and Mr. Marvin have made so many of these kinds of movies that they can each make up a character out of thin air. The movie made $5 million in ticket sales in the U.S. from 1976 to 1994. Many movies made by smaller companies like Cannon Films paid Bronson a lot of money to be in them. Some of his last movies were made for that company. Bronson agreed to join Cannon in a $1.5 million deal to play in Death Wish 2, which will also be directed by Michael Winner. In the story, engineer Paul Kersey. Again, Bronson plays a man who goes to Los Angeles with his daughter. After being killed by several gang members, Kersey turns into an outlaw once more. Cannon Films hired Bronson right away for 10 to Midnight, in which he played a police officer on the hunt for a serial killer. The movie is their fourth work together. James Bronson and director J. Thomas Lee. They were chosen by ITC Entertainment to be in the movie The Evil That Men Do. For Death Wish 3, Cannon Films brought Bronson and Winner back together. Thompson directed Murphy's Law, in which Bronson plays Jack Murphy, an angry and grumpy LAPD officer who drinks to dull his feelings. The Hurt of Hard Truth. He played a part in John Mackenzie's Act of Vengeance in 1986. The story of this movie is based on a true story, and he plays Union boss Joseph Yablonsky on screen. A. Boyle. Bronson played the opposite type for the HBO TV movie. He said, "It's a complete departure for me. I'm not wearing a mustache and I'm not carrying a gun. I don't do any violence in this film." He said that he had to give it a lot of thought before accepting because he hadn't done TV acting in a long time. His background in mining helped him do this. He had to give up the lead role in the Delta Force so he could work on this movie. The Kingston Whig Standard's Greg Berlier and the Advocate Messenger's Robert De Matteo both gave Bronson good marks for acting like himself, even with. For all his fame and wealth, Bronson was still troubled by what he lost as a child, and how hard it was for him to be an actress. During 1973, a newspaper article said that he was so shy and quiet that he couldn't even watch his own movies. Forbes said this about Bronson: still suspicious, still holds grudges, still hates interviews, still hates to give anything of himself, still can't believe it has really happened to him. He was angry that he finally got noticed in the US and after becoming famous. He wouldn't work for a famous director who turned him down in the past. Roger Ebert wrote in 1974 that Bronson doesn't give away information, doesn't go into detail, and doesn't have any ideas about his movies. He said Bronson threatened to get Jay Cox, a reviewer for Time magazine, because Cox had written a bad review that Bronson saw as an attack on his character. He also said that Bronson seemed violent in real life, unlike other actors who played violent roles on screen. Everyone he put up a wall against could only see one person through it. How did Jill Ireland and Charles Bronson meet? In the early 1960s, close to the end of Hollywood's golden age, his wife Harriet Tendler was still married to Bronson. The book Charlie and Me says that they met at an acting school in Philadelphia, but they came from very different worlds. He was 26 years old and she was 18. Tendler's dad made a lot of money as a dairy farmer. Bronson, on the other hand, came from a very poor family that barely had enough money to feed themselves. It even paid for my living costs. As in a fairy tale, they met and became best friends, which then turned into a much more serious relationship. They were both struggling actors who were looking for that one big break, and Harriet helped them both along the way. Chances started coming Bronson's way slowly but surely. When the people who made John Sturges' movie The Great Escape called, he was happy to take the next step in his career. However, this was the start of the end for Tendler. They were no longer together. It was lucky for Bronson that Steve McQueen, James Garner, James Coburn, and Richard Attenborough all became co-stars on one of his shoots. David McCallum didn't stop giving us the best feelings when he brought his wife Jill to see the play. Bronson is said to have told McCallum that he was going to steal his wife, which made the Scottish star very angry. As promised, what was bound to happen did happen. It was 1965 when Bronson and Tendler broke up, and it was 1967 when McCallum and Ireland did the same. It was in 1968 that Charles Bronson married Jill Ireland. Even though they were angry at each other, Bronson and McCallum had made up and settled their differences peacefully. The rest, as they say, is history. The romance was the start of a friendship that was both romantic and useful. They had 7 children, 2 from Bronson's first marriage to Harriet Tendler, 3 from Jill's marriage, 1 adopted child, and 2 of their own, Zuleika and Katrina, who they also adopted. They lived in a huge house in Bel Air, Los Angeles. The 2 people in this relationship fell in love and went on to work together on 16 movies as a business partnership. Bronson now was well known in the business and made sure that Ireland would almost always play his lead lady or a similar part in his future projects. Bronson made sure to give her a lot of chances, even though she was nowhere near as famous as her now famous husband. Small roles in movies like being Robert Mitchum's dinner date in Buzz Kulik's Villa Rides and Maria Reina Valakai in Terence Young's Assassination by Peter Hunt, The Valakai Papers, and her last movie, she made sure she didn't waste any of it. Out of all the movies they made together, Frank D. Gilroy's From Noon Till 3 might be the one that best shows how much they loved each other. Usually Bronson takes up the whole screen and Ireland is just a damsel in trouble, an extra, or a femme fatale who can slightly change the main character's path. The Irish Amanda that Jill plays is the heart of this Western romantic comedy. She brings an otherwise dull movie to life. One might think that Bronson gave his wife the part as a gift so that she could show off her acting skills in a new way. The way Ireland talks about her also shows what role she plays in their relationship. She was the soul that showed a beautiful side of the often misunderstood Bronson and was the bright spot in his life, which had a lot of problems to solve. Her stunning beauty and sweet personality really made the photos better. To put it mildly, Bronson and Ireland were ecstatic. She and her husband were one of Hollywood's most powerful pairs, and her popularity kept rising with each new movie until they got some bad news all of a sudden. People who knew Jill Ireland were told she had breast cancer in 1984, and she died today. Life Wish, a personal story of survival and lifeline, and My Fight to Save My Family are the two books that the author wrote about her brave fight with illness over a period of 6 years. Ireland was also given the American Cancer Society's Presidential Medal of Honor for courage. The sad news is that she died of the deadly disease at their Malibu home in 1999. Bronson was sitting next to her when she died, and he was very sad. After she died, Charles was never the same. But Ireland would always be in his heart, even after he married singer Kim Weeks in 1998. He made an empty cane to remember his wife after she died because it was made just for him, and he put his late wife's ashes inside it safely. Jill Ireland has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame on Hollywood Boulevard for her work in the movie business. That same year, Jill Clayburgh played the lead role in the made-for-TV movie Reason for Living, the Jill Ireland story. The movie, which was based on Ireland's autobiography Lifelines and named her after her death. As an executive director, got mixed reviews when it came out. As part of her study for the part, Clayburgh read Ireland's memoir Lifelines and listened to interviews in which Ireland was interviewed. The actor had never met Ireland in real life. Charles Bronson may have been a Hollywood star, but his life was not always easy. He had to go through some tough jobs and careers, like working in a coal mine and as a shooter on a B-29 during World War II. He got his big break in the movie business, but it was meeting Jill Ireland that really changed his life. It's really cool to watch Charles Bronson fall deeply in love with someone. For the most part, the star wasn't acting like himself when he let out even a hint of emotion. But even the toughest people can be moved by love. He couldn't handle how beautiful and kind Jill Ireland was. They fell in love with him after he let down his guard. They have worked together on hundreds of movies, and this will always be a reminder of one of the most famous movie relationships ever. Since his partner had already died, it was only a matter of time before he did too. Charles Bronson died on August 30th, 2003, at the Los Angeles Hospital Cedars-Sinai, at the age of 81. People have said that he died of pneumonia and Alzheimer's disease, but neither of those conditions is listed on his death certificate. Instead, respiratory failure and metastatic lung cancer are listed as the main causes of death, with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and congestive cardiomyopathy listed as secondary causes. He was buried in the Brownsville Cemetery in West Windsor, Vermont, with Jill Ireland's ashes in the cane. This was done to show that the two are together in death. Film critic Stephen Hunter said of Bronson at the time of his death that he was oozing male life force. He always projected the charisma of ambiguity. Was he an ugly, handsome man or a handsome, ugly man? You were never sure. So you had to study him more, Hunter said. He never became a great actor, but he knew exactly how to dominate a scene quietly. Bronson was the man whose name ended in a vowel. Never quit, never complained, and never skulked. He sulked and simmered with class resentments, but he hung in there, got the job done, and didn't expect thanks. His nobility was all the more palpable because it never had to be put into words. Bronson told critic Roger Ebert in 1974, "I'm only a product like a cake of soap, to be sold as well as possible." He was making movies at the time, so he didn't have much time for playing. He said, "I bring something to the role. There are never any long dialogue scenes to establish a character. He has to be fully established and ready to work at the start of the movie." Director Michael Winner said, "Bronson need not have said that. Go into any great detail about what he does or how he does it, because he has a quality that the movie camera responds to. He looks strong on screen even when he's just standing there or playing a passive part. There is a depth, a mystery, and a constant feeling that something will happen." Charles Bronson may have died, but his importance and legacy were far from over. In fact, Charles Bronson's legacy, the action type in movies, has been changed a lot by Charles Bronson. His style and how he understood what was going on make him someone that other action heroes will look up to. Bronson's movies dealt with issues of right and wrong, revenge, and morals. These themes were easy for viewers to stay interested in, and they led directors to make more movies. Even better, his drawings of very complicated people set up complicated changes to standard gender roles in movies. It gave a much more in-depth account of what it means to be a man. This effect is still strong today, as many action stars got their start because of Bronson. During his career, Bronson was praised for his work in many movies. Even though he didn't win many big awards, the fact that he was well-liked and respected by others says a lot about his skill and the impact he had on his field as a whole. He may be dead, but Bronson's work will live on. Of course, the intense and gripping stories in many of his movies are a big part of why he is still one of the most important directors of all time. So that the important things he did for movies won't be forgotten, his fans and reviewers keep going back to his work. At least this is what Bronson's story says. A lot of people who want to be actors or filmmakers are moved by him. People like them will find his story of going from nothing to wealth inspiring. It will also help people who have ideas but don't trust or believe in their own voices. Thank you for reading this exciting story about love, success, and death. Please like, subscribe, and let us know what you think by leaving a comment below.